and avoid the things that they can't tolerate. If they are seeking certain kinds of textures or input in their mouth, such as if they need that proprioceptive input, having things like bagels, things that are like heavy chewing kinds of things. So bagels, gum, celery, maybe even like Cheetos that have more of a crunch kind of a thing. You can do a lot of like whistles and so blowing whistles is also good to have more of that kind of like the blowing um, kind of that puckering kind of thing in their mouth. You could have other things um, like even having like glurch. It's basically a combination of glue and starch, and have them like take a straw and blow bubbles into that, or even blowing bubbles with a bubble blower, or blowing bubbles into their milk and or different kinds of foods and stuff, and actually even just seeing if they can make bubbles in that. Again, you want to consider if you want to be playing with food or not in that environment. Sometimes the children might even be craving a lot of very spicy and really strong flavored kinds of things. So if that's the case, you might provide a lot of like the warhead type of really sour candies or soured flavors. It could be that they need really spicy kinds of things. But again, you want to do a lot of that detective work right up front. And as you're seeing the child, you want to continue to do that over time to find out what are the things that this child really needs to have and what are the things that the child needs to avoid. So, with that sensory diet, you want to provide the things that the child needs on a regular basis, again, so that they don't seek that input inappropriately. And then, if they are very sensitive to some of those things, you want to try to avoid those different um, um, sensory stimuli in their environment, whether it's, again, the sound or the texture or the um, flavors, smells, things like that. So, those are some of the main rationale for the different things. I hope you had a lot of different activities that we talked about in class that you could also pull in. Again, you could write up your sensory diet and have just a whole list of things for the family to try. And you did some of that in your intervention plan that you did at the end of the semester in 724 as well. So you should have a lot of different ideas. Again, go back to your notes. I'm going to say one more thing about the sensory processing measure. When you get back to school, hopefully you get back to school at some point. Um, we were going to get more information on this for you probably next year, but if you haven't gotten a chance to see it, make sure that you do look at the sensory processing measure quick tips. It is a book of different ideas for each item that's on the sensory processing measure. They have the quick tips go along with each of those items. So let's say the child has difficulty interacting with their peers. That's like one of the first items on the sensory processing measure that the parent would rate. And if that's an area of concern for that child, then there are like 4 or 5, maybe even up to 10 different things that you could actually suggest for the family and the child to try to provide that kind of stimulation that the child is needing. So it does that for every single item on the sensory processing measure. So again, I really encourage you to look at that. There's also a little bit more information on those quick tips that are that you can get online. It's they're provided through the Western Psychological Services. So you can go to, I think it's WPS.com. You'd have to look it up, but it is Western Psychological Services. And then look up the SPM Quick Tips and see if there are any there'll just be samples on that, but that is something that you might want to consider looking at and see if that's something that if you are practicing in peds in the future, that might be something that you'd actually want to be looking at for your place of employment. Again, I feel like I'm kind of doing a commercial here, but I did a research project with that tool, and it was really helpful, and we saw a lot of results. And I actually wrote an article about that is in the Journal of Occupational Therapy, Schools, and Early Intervention. So um, it is something that is effective. So there's some evidence for that. And again, I miss you all. It's been great, at least having some kind of indirect contact with you.